Letters of recs are easy. Why do you need to make a video talking about it? My letter writers will know what to do. They've done this a million times.
No.
Just because someone else is writing your letter doesn't mean it's time for you to be tapping out, okay?
Okay.
The letter of rec is the one area that you do not want to overlook because it can be the determining factor that gets you an interview. It is also the one area where you have limited control because you are waiving your rights to see it. So that is why in Letter of Rec 101, we are going to
Take back some of that power
and make sure that you get both the letters that you need and strong letters from your writers. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Nee. I will be attending medical school this upcoming fall, and I am here to pass on my wisdom over to you so that you can also get that juicy A.
Okay, I have to grab a seat. That was a lot of effort.
In this video, I'm going to be taking you through each step, including who you should ask, how many letters you should get, when you should aim to get them by, how do you go about asking for them, and once you have those letters, how do you go about choosing which letters to send to each school. And before we get started, I want to mention that my school did not offer committee letters or letter packets, so in this video, I'm only going to be talking about individual letters of rec, but down in the description box below, I'm going to link you guys to some useful websites that discuss committee letters and letter packets and how to go about getting those. But each school will also have a different protocol and procedures, so don't forget to check what those are like at your school. Let's start with one of the most basic questions. Who should I approach to ask for a letter of rec? Now, there are multiple categories within this question. The two major ones are academic versus non-academic. Now, for your academic, you want it to be recent, which means within the past 3 years since you've taken that course. Within the academic category, there are two additional categories, your science and your non-science. The science is going to be classes coming from the bio, the chem, the physics discipline. Now, some schools are going to be strict about having your science letters coming from these three disciplines. Other schools are going to be a little bit more flexible and will consider courses coming from the math discipline as a science letter of rec as well. As for your non-science, this is going to be your humanities, your foreign language, your English classes, basically any course that is going to belong in the all other category of your GPA. If you are unsure about which courses fall into these disciplines, I'm going to link it in the description box down below so that you can have it for your reference. Now, here's a little caveat. For some schools, your research PI will not count as a science letter of rec, even if you took that research for credit. Now, for these schools, they will only count it as a letter of rec if you also took a course where your PI was your instructor and you got credit for it. Although I would strongly recommend against using your PI as your science letter of rec because you are risking not meeting the minimum requirements for some school, and this is going to limit the number of schools that is going to look at you as a competitive applicant. You can, however, use it as a supplementary letter in addition to your science letter of rec. I, for example, struggled a lot with finding a science letter writer. So I ended up picking my biostat course because I did really well and I felt like I had a connection with my professor. So biostat falls under the math discipline, and I realized that for some schools, they're going to not view that as a strong science letter. So for those schools, what I did was I made sure to also include my research PI in order to sort of pad it and make sure that there aren't any questions about my academic abilities or my ability to critically think and approach difficult problems. Moving on to the non-academic category, this is going to include people like your research PI, physician you shadowed, maybe your manager at work, a volunteer coordinator, basically anyone who can attest to your extracurricular activities. And bonus points if they are a supervisor of one of your most meaningful activities. Now, the next obvious question is, how many letters should I aim to be getting? And my answer is, at the very bare minimum, 3. 2 coming from your science professor and 1 from a non-science. Some schools are going to limit their max number of letters to 3, so it can be a good idea to try to get letters that overlap in categories. For example, if you have a physician professor whom you also worked with through research or you also shadowed, they will be able to attest to you as a character beyond just your academics. However, I would recommend 6 letters to show a variety of different angles about yourself, and this also gives you some wiggle room in case one of your letter writers backs out. So I personally had 6 letters coming from my micro, my biostat, and my Korean professor, as well as my CNA manager, who also happens to be a nurse, my research PI, and my advisor for a college mentoring job that I did. With that said, remember that the max number of letters that you can upload onto AMCAS is 10. Once you have identified your letter writers, you are going to want to ask them at the end of your academic term and ask them in person if possible. But if not, for some reason, you can reach out to them via email. When you talk to them, you want to mention why you chose them specifically to be your letter writer, as well as show them what you valued from their class and what you took away from it. Now, if you don't need a letter right at the moment, still let them know that you are looking to them to be a potential letter writer for you and that you will stay in touch and keep them updated until the time comes. Now, after your letter writer has agreed to write one for you, you are going to want to ask, what do they need from you to write a strong letter of recommendation? And then you're going to follow this up with everything that they asked for, as well as some additional material that I will be going over in just a minute. You might be asking, like, what are these things that I should be including in my email to help guide them in the writing process? I will go into length about what to include in your email in the strong letter of rec with weak connection to professor video. So hit the subscribe and notification button so that you can be notified when that video comes out. There's going to be a lot of useful information in there, so you don't want to miss it. But in the meantime, I'm also going to put a condensed list of the major things that you want to include in your email right here. So when should you aim to get your letters of rec? I would say when it is 1 to 2 months prior to when you would like to have it, reach out to your professor via email and provide them with the necessary information and material that they need for them to write you a letter. While I recommend having your letters rec early, just note that you will not be able to submit it or have your letter ID until the application opens, which is going to be in early May. However, if you do want them early like me, I would recommend using a letter storage service like Interfolio to store those letters and then transmit them over to MCAS once the application opens. This service definitely eased my worries about getting things in on time. At the very latest, you want to have your letters in before you submit your secondaries. So yes, while you can upload your letters rec after you have submitted your primary application, just keep in mind that the med school will not review your application and send you interviews until they have received all of the application material. And this includes your MCAT, your secondaries, as well as your letters of rec. That means missing your letters of rec can cause a delay in your application, thus when you get interviews. Now, with the letters completed, how do you go about deciding which letter to send to each school? Chances are with 6 letters, you are probably going to have more than the required amount and even the max amount that you can send to each school. And if there is no max, like, should I be sending in all of my letters? Like, how do you go about choosing which letters to include? Your decision will be based on 2 things. 1, whether a certain type of letter is required, and 2, if there is a max number of letters that you can include. If there is a defined requirement for the type of letter and the number of letters, satisfy those requirements.
Obviously.
If there is no defined max or letter type requirement, that is not a sign for you to go ahead and give them all the letters of recs that you have. This is especially true if you have 6 or more letters, because you are risking that some of your strong letters are going to be overlooked because there are so many letters there for the AdComs to read. You're also potentially risking redundancy if some of the letter types overlap. For example, if you have like 3 coming from volunteering and they all tell a similar story about you, like, that doesn't provide any additional information, but is going to detract from the rest of the letters as well. In this situation, I would recommend you try to include 1 science, 1 non-science, 1 from a research PI if available, 1 from work, and this is especially crucial if it is like patient interaction related type work, and 1 from volunteering. This will allow you to showcase the most diverse version of yourself. Now, if you have more than 1 of a certain letter type, you want to pick one that is going to paint you in the best light. This is going to depend on your impact while you're in that position, as well as your connection to your letter writers. Each school is going to have a different letter requirement, so I would recommend making a spreadsheet that lists out all of the requirements for each school, and then have a separate column where you assign which letters you want to assign to that school based off of those requirements. This is going to be super helpful because when the time comes for you to input this into MCAS, you're going to have it all ready to go. So here's the spreadsheet that I use to help me out in this process. And there you have it, besties. This has been Letter of Rec 101. Office hours are always open in the comments section down below. I hope you found this lecture helpful.
Now go out into the world and apply it.
Until next time, best wishes, warmest regards. Bye!